Picture the moment. The sky over the Persian Gulf turns alive in darkness. American stealth bombers move silently through the night. Israeli fighter jets race toward their targets. Then, in just hours, hundreds of strikes hit Iran's military and strategic sites. Oil markets panic. Missiles launch across the region. The Strait of Hormuz, one of the world's most critical waterways, suddenly becomes a global danger zone. But that was only part of the story. What shocked many analysts was not just the scale of the attack, it was who stood beside Washington when the operation began. It was not NATO as a united bloc. It was not Europe's biggest powers. It was Israel. A nation of around 10 million people became America's most active military partner during one of the most dangerous moments in the Middle East. But this is where things changed. How did a country outside NATO become so central to U.S. strategy? Why were some traditional allies cautious while Israel moved immediately? And what does that reveal about the future of power, alliances, and global security? To understand that, we need to go back decades. The roots of this crisis stretch back to 1979. That year, Iran's revolution overthrew the U.S.-backed Shah and replaced him with a new Islamic government deeply hostile to Washington. Soon after, militants stormed the American embassy in Tehran and held 52 Americans hostage for 444 days. The old U.S.-Iran partnership was gone. Over the decades that followed, tensions grew into something much deeper. American officials repeatedly accused Iran and groups linked to it of attacks across the Middle East. U.S. troops were killed in bombings, roadside attacks, and proxy conflicts from Lebanon to Iraq. The rivalry never truly disappeared. Then came October 7th, 2023. Hamas launched its deadly assault on Israel. Among those killed were American citizens. In Washington, many viewed the regional threat differently after that day. Iran was no longer seen only through diplomacy or nuclear talks. It was increasingly seen as the center of a wider network of instability. For Israel, that threat had always felt immediate. Iranian leaders had long used hostile language toward Israel. Tehran supported Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas in Gaza, and armed groups across the region. To Israeli planners, this looked like a long-term strategy of encirclement. So Israel prepared. Year after year, Israel invested heavily in defense. Despite its size, it built one of the region's most capable militaries. It maintained a powerful air force, rapid reserve mobilization, and constant real-world combat experience. Every new rocket, drone, or missile threat forced adaptation. But Iran was evolving too. Its missile program expanded in range and precision. Its drone technology spread across multiple conflicts. Concerns also rose over its nuclear program, especially after uranium enrichment levels increased and international monitoring became more difficult. What happened next shocked analysts. By 2025, pressure was rising fast. Reports described Israeli strikes on Iranian nuclear and missile infrastructure during an earlier phase of conflict. U.S. bombers later joined attacks on key facilities, including Fordow and Natanz. A temporary ceasefire followed, but it did not last. Then came the next major turning point, late 2025 into early 2026. Iran faced serious domestic unrest. Protests reportedly spread across many cities. Economic pressure was growing. The currency weakened. The government responded with force, further increasing instability inside the country. And this is where the strategy becomes clear. On February 27, 2026, the order was reportedly given for a new operation. The next morning, the United States and Israel launched a massive coordinated campaign. In the first 12 hours alone, nearly 900 strikes were reported. The mission was divided by strengths. Israel focused heavily on leadership and precision targets. The United States concentrated on larger military systems, missile networks, support facilities, and air defenses. Within a day, the conflict had entered a completely new phase. Iran responded with missile and drone attacks across the region. Bases in Qatar, Kuwait, Bahrain, and other locations came under threat. Energy infrastructure was targeted. Markets reacted immediately. The war was no longer local. It had become global in consequence. Once the retaliation began, the most important battle was no longer only in the air. It was in defense systems, interception rates, logistics, and endurance. Iran launched waves of ballistic missiles and drones. These weapons were designed not only to cause damage, but to overwhelm defenses through volume. If enough projectiles arrive at once, even advanced systems can be tested to their limit. But Israel had spent years preparing for exactly this scenario. Its air defense network worked in layers. The first layer, Iron Dome, was designed for short-range rockets and drones. It tracks incoming threats and engages only those heading toward populated areas. That selective approach helps preserve interceptors. The second layer, David's Sling, handles larger and medium-range threats. It was built to defeat more advanced missiles with precision intercept technology. The top layer, Arrow Systems, was designed for long-range ballistic threats, even outside the atmosphere. That means some missiles can be destroyed before re-entry, but the real impact came later. These systems were not operating alone. U.S. assets also played a major role. THAAD batteries, naval missile defenses, surveillance systems, refueling aircraft, and intelligence platforms all strengthened the shield. This combined network represented something bigger than a single battle. It showed what deep military integration looks like when two partners train, share data, and prepare together for years. And there was another layer to the story: production. Modern war is not only about weapons already in storage, it is about who can replace them quickly. Reports noted expanded interceptor production and joint U.S.-Israeli manufacturing deals. That matters because every successful interception uses expensive systems that must be replenished. Meanwhile, NATO's role exposed a difficult debate. Some European allies reportedly placed restrictions on base access, overflights, or direct participation in offensive operations. These were not dramatic public confrontations. They were quieter limitations that complicated planning. Why did this happen? Part of the answer is geography. Many European governments remain focused on Russia and the war in Ukraine. Their defense planning is centered on Europe's eastern front. Another factor is politics. Memories of Iraq and Afghanistan still influence public opinion across Europe. Leaders often face strong domestic pressure before supporting overseas military action. Then there is spending and capability. The United States still provides much of NATO's strategic lift, intelligence, refueling capacity, and high-end surveillance. Many allies are strong in their own regions, but rely on U.S. support for large, distant operations. The contrast with Israel was sharp. Israel viewed Iran as an immediate national threat, not a distant policy issue. It had built forces, technology, and intelligence around that exact challenge. What happened next may shape future alliances. As missiles flew and oil routes faced danger, countries in the Gulf had their own reasons to pay attention. Some had already improved ties with Israel through the Abraham Accords. Shared concerns over Iran could push deeper regional coordination in missile defense and intelligence. That means the old model of fixed alliance blocs may be changing. In some crises, flexible partnerships based on shared threats may move faster than traditional institutions. By April 2026, reports said a ceasefire had taken effect after weeks of fighting, but the damage was already enormous. Iran had reportedly lost major military infrastructure, missile production capacity, naval assets, and senior leadership. Key nuclear sites were said to be heavily damaged or unusable. The economic cost was described in staggering numbers. The wider world paid a price too. Oil markets were shaken. Shipping through the Strait of Hormuz became a major concern. Military costs for the United States rose rapidly. Regional instability spread far beyond the battlefield. But this is where things changed again. The biggest lesson may not be about missiles or bombers. It may be about alliances. For decades, many assumed NATO would always be the main framework for U.S. security cooperation everywhere. But NATO was built primarily for Europe. Different regions create different threats. In the Pacific, Washington depends on partners like Japan, South Korea, and Australia. In the Middle East, this war suggested Israel may hold a uniquely important role because of geography, intelligence access, military readiness, and deep interoperability with the United States. That does not mean NATO is irrelevant. Far from it. NATO remains central for European defense and deterrence, but it does mean America's global network is more complex than one treaty, and the future remains uncertain. Iran may rebuild deeper and harder to target. Proxy groups still exist. Regional tensions remain high. New missile races could emerge. More countries may seek integrated defense systems. The ceasefire may be holding for now, but the forces behind this conflict have not disappeared. And that means the next chapter of this story may already be underway.